At this time, I would like to turn today's program over to Debbie Horton, Communication Director for ImageSource. Debbie, you may begin.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to bring you this special webinar this morning where we're bringing together technology experts from both the user perspective as well as the technology perspective to learn more about advanced capture technology. We're really fortunate to have two guest speakers from Sacramento County with us today to talk about why they chose to invest in this technology, which is allowing them to do more process more forms with the same or fewer resources, and they forecasted some pretty spectacular ROI. So first and foremost, welcome everyone, and once again, we do encourage questions along the way, so please do utilize that chat or the question and answer chat function on the side of your screen, and we'll attempt to answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation. I'd like to start off today by introducing the featured experts on the line with us. First, we have Doug Kudlick, Senior IT Analyst at the Sacramento County Department of Human Assistance Information Services Division. How are you today, Doug?
Fine, thanks.
Doug's responsible for the call center software and all of the content management and imaging needs, and that's utilizing IBM FileNet and Kofax. He's been a key part of implementing the forms recognition technology at Sacramento County, and he's worked with Kofax technology for over 11 years. He's an expert in his field, and we're really fortunate to have him with us today, so thanks for joining us, Doug. And also on the line from Sacramento County is Dan Calamares, the Information Technology Manager for the Business Services Bureau. And Dan's here to answer questions on how the solution impacts the county from an overall IT perspective and their plans for expansion. And he will be available at the end of the presentation for the question and answer session. And finally, here to represent Kofax and discuss the Kofax Transformation Modules technology is Ryan Basler, Senior Project Manager at Kofax. How are you today, Ryan?
Doing great, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here. And once again, I'm Debbie Horton. I'm from ImageSource, and I'll be the moderator for today's webcast event. ImageSource is an independent technology provider. We have years of experience integrating Kofax technology, and Sacramento County partnered with ImageSource to successfully implement their Kofax KTM solution. So let's start off today by going through the agenda. First, we'll briefly discuss some challenges in social service agencies and really government in general. And then we'll get right into the case study where Doug's going to discuss some of the driving factors behind Sacramento County's decision to implement forms recognition technology. He'll talk about some of the problems they were experiencing and the impetus to add the Kofax KTM to their existing imaging platform. He's going to give us a first-hand account on the implementation process and explain how moving beyond traditional capture to advanced capture has really allowed them to gain additional efficiencies from their imaging and their content management system as well. And then he'll discuss their plans for the future and how they plan to move forward with the technology. From there, we'll pass it to Ryan, who's going to talk about the KTM technology specifics and get into a little bit more detail on how the advanced capture technology can provide efficiencies in your organizations. We'll conclude with the question and answer, so please remember to submit questions you have along the way, and we'll try to get to all of those. So let's start out with talking about challenges that are facing government organizations today when it comes to processing forms, and specifically the impact on social service agencies in today's current economic environment. Exponential growth. So I'm sure many of you are on the line and many of you are here today because you're experiencing some of the same problems that Sacramento County was facing, and that is forms entering your system at an exponential rate, which in turn means more processing of documentation and paper. And various government organizations are charged with providing services to their constituents in a timely manner, which requires the processing of documents and applications. Human services departments have food and medical assistance requests, financial assistance, housing and shelter requests, child care aid, and more. Employment security departments are processing unemployment benefit applications. Secretary of States are processing applications for businesses and LLCs. And why this wave of forms are flooding every department and every organization that constituents are applying for products or services, they also exist in a number of language versions to accommodate the many dialects and different cultures that exist in the United States today. And then finally, adding to that growth and generation of paper is the overlap in required supplemental information. So all those accompanying documents, the birth certificates, the paycheck stubs, that type of thing. Often people have to submit those multiple times on different applications, and that just adds to that exponential growth of paper. And the reality facing government organizations today in this recessionary climate, and specifically those providing human services, is an escalated demand for services, which is challenging a shrinking workforce. And that's being caused by cuts in state funding and also very highly constrained budgets. The chart on this slide is showing that trend, and this is an example in a family planning center. And the top part of this chart is showing an increase in clients and an increase in demand for services. And then the bottom half of the slide is showing cutbacks and reduction in labor. And this is just one example, but it's a trend that governments are facing across the board. And that's exactly the scenario that Sacramento County Department of Human Assistance was facing when they looked to Kofax technology to help them handle that increase in demand with their shrinking workforce. So now I'm going to pass it off to Doug Kutlick, and he's going to share with us some of the challenges that they were facing, the solution they implemented, and how they used that solution to augment and power up their existing imaging system with the goal of fully automating their forms, documents, applications to better serve their constituents. Doug?
Thanks, Debbie. As Debbie mentioned, the Department of Human Assistance is the agency that administers the aid programs for the County of Sacramento. And so we have, roughly 100,000 different cases in different programs. That could be Medi-Cal, CalWorks, CalFresh, otherwise known as food stamps. And so we have a lot of documents associated with that. In fact, we have like 1,000 different numbered forms that we deal with in handling the client base. So I just wanted to paint a picture of the evolution that we as an organization went through. We started out before document imaging, quite a few years ago now. It was 2008 when we started document imaging. But back then, we had a case-based workload, which meant that eligibility workers had, they were assigned a particular set of cases. And that caseload was growing. And as the recession hit, that caseload grew even more, and our employee base shrunk, as we adjusted to the changing economics. So what that meant was that, all that paper that we had been collecting was in individual workers' cubicles. And so each worker had their own cases in their cubicles, but nobody else could have access to that. In addition, we had a huge warehouse that we used for storing the back volumes or the closed cases. And 40,000 square feet, that's about the size of a big box retail store. So you can imagine the amount of effort that went into maintaining that. And so obviously it was difficult to share documents between workers or to get the back files. If a worker needed to see the previous year's documents, they would have to submit a request, and then that would be retrieved from that warehouse, and that could take a couple of days to get those documents. And it also required that we had dedicated clerical staff to moving papers. So you can imagine how inefficient of a process that was. Additionally, we had the potential to lose case documents or even entire case files. And, periodically we'd have to go looking for what happened to this case or what happened to these documents. And so, again, that's unproductive time. So overall, the cost that we were spending to maintain the paper was about $3 million, and that includes labor costs, that includes facility costs, that includes lost productivity. So then we started document imaging. And so how did that change what we were doing? Well, we still had a lot of paper to deal with, and the way we implemented document imaging back then was with the barcode separator sheets that many of you may be familiar with. And so the graphic on this slide shows you that, we might have a pile of paper and then a separator sheet, another pile of paper and another separator sheet. So each of these groups of paper would be, one category of a document, of a case document, and so that would be filed into our imaging repository as such. So, if workers wanted to, improve their productivity, but if they wanted to find a particular document, they'd still have to look through these 14 categories to find that particular form they were looking for. So it was a step forward, but not the end result. Also, we had, Sacramento County is a big county, so we had various bureaus. At the time, we had about 30 bureaus around the county, and they were each doing imaging. Some were better than others in quality and in quantity. The clerical staff that were doing the imaging might not have been dedicated. They might have to be redirected, for example, to deal with the front counter if there was a large client coming in that day or whatever. So to deal with those quality issues, we consolidated our document imaging to one facility. That allowed us to promise same-day imaging, got our error rate down, and also increased the productivity for our imaging staff. But again, this is still using those separator sheets, barcode separator sheets. So why would we want to change that and go to KTM? What would be the benefits for us in changing the way we were doing document imaging? Well, we wanted to reduce our paper processing. All that sorting of paper before you can even put it into the scanner, that takes a lot of time. We also, there was printing of the cover sheets, a lot of manual indexing, in the paper world. And also we wanted to increase the benefit to the eligibility workers. We wanted to give them faster access to the documents, so that they could do their work more quickly. KTM also is a benefit to us because a lot of our forms are pre-printed. There may be state forms, we have county forms, but they're this consistent format, so that makes them easily recognizable by an automated software like KTM. And the fields are in the same place on particular documents, so we're able to extract information easily for the OCR, optical character recognition. So for example, we have a QR7 shown on this page, which is a quarterly status report. Clients have to submit every 3 months saying, what's changed in my household over the past 3 months. So the KTM software is able to recognize the form, then it's able to extract the case number and other information that we might need for our business process. So the actual implementation that we did, we started with our highest volume forms. I mentioned the QR7. There's an equivalent form called the MSR for Medi-Cal. Those are our two highest forms. The first 2 weeks of the month, we get buckets of those forms through the mail as the clients submit those to, keep on aid or whatever status might have changed in their household. Again, we're extracting the case number off those forms, and then we validate that against our welfare case system to make sure that we've got a good number. Because as you know, OCR might be good, it might be not, but you want to make sure that you got the right number because you're going to say that this particular document belongs to John Smith, and you want to make sure that that's who it in fact belongs to. And then we categorize the forms. Since it recognized there was a QR7, it can still use that same 14 set of categories. It automatically places into those categories. And we can also gather the trailing documents. When they submit the QR7, if there are any changes, the clients have to submit the supporting documentation. That could be a pay stub, it could be a rent receipt, or whatever it might be. So what were some of the successes that we achieved? Well, the first thing is that it works. That the workers, the eligibility workers, are happy with it. The clerical staff is happy with it, and we can also see that there's much more that we can do down the road in the future now that we've put this basic infrastructure in place. It relieves some of our bottlenecks. I mentioned that the first 2 weeks of the month were the QR7 season, as we call it. So even doing document imaging with the separator sheets, that took basically everybody's time in the imaging center for those first 2 weeks. By using KTM, we're able to free up some of that staff time so they can do something else besides just process the QR7s. We do image processing, not paper pushing. So all of our QA work is done in the image world, not the paper world. It's a lot easier to move images around. Or do whatever you need to do in software versus, hard paper. And it's much more productive. So as I mentioned, that the staff was eager to do more. They're happy. For example, the clerical staff who were doing imaging processing, when we started saying, hey, we want to implement this KTM thing, their response to us was, well, look, we're so busy just doing QR7s, we don't have time. Well, when we implemented it, and then they said, hey, this is saving us time. Let's do more. Let's add more forms. Let's get more benefit out of it. So that was a great turnaround to see from our clerical staff. So as far as return on investment, before we started, we calculated what the return on investment could be. And the figures that you show were based on, how many pages we image annually, what's the potential growth of that, what are our costs for our employees, how many employees we have. All those factors were put in to estimate that it basically took us about 2 years to return the investment that we made into the software. And the integrator that we used, ImageSource, they really helped us out. They brought together a bunch of experienced and certified people. They did a thorough discovery. The ROI that I presented, that was based on calculations that they were able to do given our inputs. They were able to recommend, the best methodology we should use. They provided training and enough training so that we were able to manage the product going forward. They were able to turn it over to us and we're able to keep going. So what are some of the recommendations that we have, that we learned? Well, one is that, there's a lot of proficiency required, especially on your IT staff, and you need to plan for that. So just setting it up is a highly technical thing, so if you don't have that experience in-house, you might consider an integrator. Even supporting it down the road, there's a learning curve to that, so you certainly want to accommodate training for that. And for your operators as well, they need to be trained on how to use it. You probably should also consolidate your processes. As we did, we took all of our imaging and put it into one location, but also, just the numbers and varieties of forms. I mentioned early on that we have like about 1,000 numbered forms in our repository. Well, if there's a way to narrow that down, so much the better. Also, you want to dedicate a sufficient number of staff until you really understand what the work entails. We can do these ROIs, and on paper it says you need, 10 people or whatever the number is, but until you actually get there doing it, you don't necessarily know. So, and as you do learn, though, then you can realize, oh, okay, now I can take some of these people and they can do other tasks. And again, since the technical product, is pretty intense, if you're going to maintain it yourself, you probably should consider certifications for your personnel. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ryan Basler.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and dive into some of the enabling technologies here that have enabled Sacramento County to achieve such a good return on their investment and achieve the automation that they were seeking. So generally speaking, KTM comes into play because organizations like Sacramento County require an automation of the capture and process of incoming documents into their organization. This automation of capture and processing should be independent of the location or the device. It should be also independent of the type of document that you're capturing, whether that's forms such as Sacramento County has used KTM for, or more unstructured or semi-structured documents like invoices or contracts. It should also be independent of how that comes in, whether that's through the mail, through fax, through email, or even more recently, Kofax has developed a mobile capture capability using smartphones. And all this should be done in a reliable and secure process, being able to have an audit trail of where that document is at all times and who is touching it. So this results in what we call touchless processing, and as you noticed in that graphic, the time that it takes to understand what a document is and decide what to do with it is drastically reduced with Kofax technologies. So you can see here various input channels, whether that's paper, fax, email, etc., are coming through the process, and Kofax technologies enable the automation of understanding what that document is, classifying that document, removing the need for the separator sheets and the pre-sorting that Doug was talking about, as well as deciding what to do with that document and what data to extract off that document and where to send that data downstream, whether that's to a business process or to a repository or a line of business system of some sort. Now there is a certain level of documents that will come through that do still require human touch, and of course that process is minimized with the automation of the capture process. So the key capabilities of Kofax, it can be broken down into these different boxes here. We have the capture process where you're the scanning portion, as well as classifying the document and separating the document, being able to understand if I have a multi-page document coming in, what is the last page of the current document and the first page of the next document. Then being able to, once we have know what the document is and the boundaries of those documents, being able to automatically extract pertinent information off of those documents. For example, many forms have, I know Sacramento County had a good number of fields. Some forms can have up to upwards of 300 to 400 fields on one single form. So it can be very laborious to enter data manually into your systems of record. So that's where the automated extraction comes in, being able to automatically extract that data off of the documents. And then communicating the resulting documents and field values to either inside systems or outside organizations or partners or customers. So really the key here is getting the highest accuracy to maximize the automation aspect. The more accurate you can classify and separate and extract data, the better your system will be, the more automated it will be, and therefore the better a return on investment you will have. So there is, if you notice, some space there because there are some manual steps, as we mentioned earlier, to be able to review any kind of classified or separated documents and make sure that those are correct. For example, maybe something comes in as a very noisy fax that's been refaxed 5 times for some reason, or maybe there's coffee spills on it. I mean, who knows? Documents can come in all sorts of weird shapes and sizes and conditions. So we want to make sure to have that process to manually review a document and just ensure that any data going downstream is extremely accurate. So this is where the doc review comes in, as well as the validation. Validation would be where you're either validating with back-end systems, for example, a case number being used to look up information on the particular account, or even a manual data entry for a very important field that you always want to make sure is accurate, or maybe there was a poor OCR read and you'd want to go ahead and correct any kind of errors from that OCR. So whatever the case may be, the validation step ensures that all of the data is accurate, and really ensures the key here is you want the most user efficiency as possible in that interface. And so we're very sensitive with Kofax technologies to be able to provide interfaces for the users that maximize their productivity. So how does this all fit in? This is the overall. I won't go too slowly through this. I'll run quickly here through this slide, but it shows how Kofax Transformation Modules, or KTM for short, is kind of fits into the overall capture system. You have the scanners up front, It does some image cleanup using VRS. Then it goes through the whole process that I just described. After that, you release the documents and the data back to various systems and processes, and Kofax provides over 100 different connectors, either directly or through our partner communities, such as through ImageSource. So these documents are then released into corporate systems, as you can see here. We have a monitoring capability to monitor the process as it goes through the process, and we use standard databases that we can interface with that are already a part of the enterprise ecosystem. So let's dive into each of those steps that we went through: classification, separation, doc review, data extraction, and validation. So we'll take each of those in turn. The first here is classification and separation. So as you can see, different documents are coming in, and whether that's a form, an invoice, a letter, whatever it might be. In Sacramento County's case, they're focusing on forms. So for example, you can have many different types of forms, and then even many different revisions of the same type of form. So suddenly this becomes quite complex, and the technologies that are used here are essentially either layout-based or content-based. So the software will look at the document and either differentiate the type of document it is through the way it appears, pixel-wise, or the way, or the content that's actually in the document after an OCR, full-page OCR read. So the steps here is for the customer or Sacramento County. What they did is they went through and understood the categories of the different forms that they had. They gathered samples of those forms, and instead of doing a lot of laborious coding and rules writing and rewriting and tweaking when new documents come in, they simply trained the system with those samples. And after they train the system, the KTM product will classify and separate and come up with the rules that it needs to know for when you roll this out in production. And after that training, you roll it out in production, and it will automatically go ahead and classify and separate those documents that come through in the mail or through fax or any other channel. So the next step is document review, and this is where you have a person who is dedicated to reviewing the classification and separation results before extraction. And you can see kind of how that fits into the overall flow here. And the reason why we do this is not only because we want this document to be classified correctly for downstream systems, but also, even more important, I think, is to make sure that when it gets to the extraction step, we know which fields need to be extracted. We only know which fields need to be extracted if we know the document type. So this is really the first step. Next step is going back to the automation portion, is automatic extraction. This is a huge value, especially for forms that have many fields on them, or even correspondence and invoices and other things, other documents. This removes the need for manual keying. Whereas before you may have needed 10, 20, 30 people in a room keying these documents as they come into the organization, we can bring that down to 3, 4, or 5 people, depending on the type of document and the different technologies that are used. Focusing a little bit on forms, since Sacramento County is really focused on that in their application, you can see here that forms will come in various shapes and sizes, and they will be, a lot of times, they will be skewed or shifted based on the fax not coming through exactly straight, for example. And you can see here one example where zones were set up in KTM, but the document isn't really lining up with those zones that we've set up previously. Well, that's not a problem. KTM intelligently adjusts for and moves those zones over based on the skews and the shifts that it sees. So you really don't have to design a form with registration marks. You can just take any form, and KTM will intelligently process that data. Here's another example of something coming in where we've shifted that as well. Another nice feature of forms processing is the ability to drop out the background. This is useful because, again, we want high accuracy when we extract the data off of these documents. And high accuracy means high automation and less people doing the manual keying. So here you can see the little combs that are between each letter. Now that can get in the way of the OCR. So what we've done in KTM is be able to drop out those comb marks, and it just results in a lot cleaner zone for us to extract. We're also able to handle modifications to forms. I love this example. Jamboree is my wife's favorite store, so great for when you have kids. But here's a revision of a Jamboree form, basically getting on a mailing list. And you can see that zones have been set up on that. Well, if you go over to Rev B, because the marketing department decided to make a change and didn't tell anyone, now downstream we have to handle that change. Well, in KTM, it's very easy to just take those zones, resize them, and copy over all the settings, the OCR engines, the thresholds, everything else that's involved in extraction, and just move that right over. So now we get into data validation. This is, again, where we're validating the data that may not be correct, but again, this is a very small percentage of documents that we're going to have to do this for. One of the nice benefits of the way that KTM has implemented validation is that you can split up the form into different validation steps and actually assign those sections of the form to different operators based on their skill sets or their security levels. For example, if you want a certain operator to focus just on social security numbers, maybe that's a trusted operator versus someone else that might not have that level of privilege. And the last item we'll talk about today for KTM is the ability to learn. I hit on this earlier where instead of having to go in and actually code and write a lot of code and a lot of rules and then have to go in and maintain that code and those rules every time a document changes or a new document enters the workflow, instead I can use KTM's learning technologies and simply provide it samples. And KTM is smart enough to develop and use the various technologies to do the maximum amount of classification and extraction for that document. Now that's in design time. We can also do this in production on the fly. So going back to that Jamboree form, if that Jamboree form had changed and it came into the workflow and we didn't know about it, the online learning technology will flag that, and the operator can actually say, this looks different, this isn't right, and flag KTM for it to go back and automatically update the master project with the new form and with the appropriate zones that the operator defines. So bottom line, this is a concept we call knowledge bases. You can use the samples and the on-the-fly online learning to create very rich knowledge bases that make KTM even more and more accurate and more automated over time. So with that, hopefully that gives you a good overview. I'll wrap up here with a capture ROI slide. I know Doug hit on a payback period that he received of 2 years, and that's very common with our customers. Most of our customers do get an ROI within 2 years, and some even in 12 months or less, depending on how manual the operation is at the time. We are a leader. Kofax is a leader in the multi-channel capture space. This is a recent result here from Forrester. We do have the highest position amongst our peers, both in strategy and in our offerings. And so we are very proud of that, and we continue to invest in our technologies on a go-forward basis, especially in some of these exciting new areas like mobile capture and business process management as well. These are two areas that we see are key growth enablers for our future. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Debbie.
Thanks, Ryan. And we'll be getting to the question and answer session in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to just take a moment and tell you a little bit more about ImageSource. As you know by now, we are the ECM integrator that Sacramento County partnered with to upgrade their Kofax technologies and really change the way that they process forms. The ImageSource professional services team provided their ROI analysis, project plan, the technology implementation, and they helped with their training along the way so that they could change and adjust to the changing business model that happens when you implement new technology. So Sacramento County chose to work with ImageSource for our breadth of experience in the enterprise content management industry, which really allows us to draw on best practices. We've been a Kofax partner for over 15 years, and we have a long list of successful integrations, and you can see just a handful of those integrations on this slide. And that gave them the confidence to know that we really know this technology inside and out. We have certified Kofax specialists on staff, and we partner with companies and organizations on consultation, implementation, test phase, rollout, and provide continued support for years beyond the initial install. We're honored to be recognized as a Kofax Platinum Partner and the #1 reseller for multiple years, and we've also won multiple Kofax Achievement Awards. And ImageSource helps both private and public organizations, and we help them to save time, money, improve services to both customers and constituents, and we do that by solving business problems. And we do that with cutting-edge ECM technology, which enables the capture, routing, storage, and retrieval of critical content. We have extensive experience integrating Kofax with almost every ECM repository that exists and line of business systems out there. And we have an ILINX middleware product that provides the necessary functionality to provide the import, export, migration, and image enablement. Basically what ILINX does is it extends the functionality of both Kofax and other ECM repositories and allows integration with customer databases and line of business systems. So please feel free to ask more about that if you have any questions. So thanks again for joining us, and now we'd like to move on to some of the questions that have been coming in throughout the webinar. And it's still not too late to type in questions into the chat function on your screen. So, or if you'd like, you could contact us directly to have a more in-depth conversation. And there's contact information on the screen right now, so please feel free to contact us directly. ImageSource representative would also be happy to provide this presentation for you on-site at your organization, so feel free to make that request if you would like to see this presentation again. So with that, let's move to the first question. One of the questions that came in was, is this webinar going to be recorded today? And yes, it will be recorded, and we will be sending out information to attendees on how to access that recording after the presentation. Let's see, another one looks like this one would be for Doug. Doug, is the case number that's being extracted from the barcode, or is it being extracted from the numbers near the barcode?
Yes, well, we're extracting the case number from text. There's text on the document that has the case number, and that's what we're actually pulling off the document. We're also pulling off a barcode, but that has separate information. It's actually a serial number for that particular document itself.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. Okay, and Ryan, it looks like this one might be for you. It says for emails, how do they get scanned in, and is there an interface that can be moved from the email into the system without having to print it and then scan it?
I'm sorry, Debbie. Ryan has stepped away at this time. We can answer that question online afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Doug, here's another question for you. You mentioned that Sacramento County is able to search for and find specific forms easier now. Can you explain how the images are classified when they are stored in the FileNet system that makes them easier to search for and identify?
Sure. Our case documents are organized by the case number or client name, and also we have those 14 categories. Well, with KTM, we're actually able to refine that. So within the 14 categories, we actually give it the form number. So if you're looking just for the QR7, you can search just for that document and case 123.
Okay, great. Let's see. Looks like, Doug, another question for you. When you are managing and retrieving your paper-based documents, and you mentioned that sometimes frequently they were lost or misplaced or not retrievable. What steps or ramifications did this cause, and what is the liability or exposure with that?
Well, one of the big liabilities or exposures is that, as a welfare department, we ask for information from the clients. If we get that information once, we're not supposed to ask for it again. So, if we were to lose that document, it's kind of, embarrassing for one thing, but also exposes ourselves for not having the document when we should have had it.
Okay, and Doug, another one for you. How was the knowledge users' acceptance and adoption of the new process?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, at first the operators were reluctant to embrace this technology because they felt they were busy as it was, but as we put in the technology, they realized how much this saved them in time, and so they were eager to use it and also to expand it.
Okay, great. Let's see. This one could be for Doug or for Dan. Dan, I think that you're on the line and might be able to answer this one too. Can you expand a bit more on the next steps and the future goals for the technology that you implemented at Sacramento County?
Okay, this is Doug. I'll take that. One of the things that we, looking to do, there's a lot of information on those forms that if we could extract could really improve our business process. For example, those quarterly status reports, if there's no change, then it's a lot simpler to update the case than if there's a bunch of changes. So if we can extract, question 1, for example, could say, are there any changes? And if the answer is no, then we can route that document to a set of workers who can process that quickly and process a lot of them, and the ones where they say there are changes, we can route those documents to a separate set of workers that know that there's going to be a lot of things to do on these particular sets of documents.
Great, thank you. Okay, and next question is, how does this improve productivity impact the constituents you serve?
Well, again, if we've received a document, it's quicker to retrieve it. We know that we have it, so that the service to the clients is quicker, more efficient, and they don't have to be wondering whether we got their documents or not.
Great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up right now, and then there are some other questions that came in that we will go ahead and address after the webinar today. We'll get in touch with you and have somebody work with you to answer the questions that we weren't able to get to today. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming to today's webinar event. And again, the contact information on the screen right now is another source to get more information. So please reach out and contact us. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have and help your organizations move forward to be more efficient with their forms processing. Thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you again for joining us. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect.